Welcome back to this latest episode of Japan's Top Business Interviews. I'm your host, Dr. Greg Story, President of Dale Carnegie Tokyo for Dale Carnegie Training here in Japan. And my special guest today is an old friend of mine, Jennie Petit, who is the President of TUV Rheinland here in Japan. Great to see you again.
Thanks for having me.
So, you've been in Japan a long time. How did you get to become the president of this major corporation in Japan?
Well, I guess it was over 30 years in the making.
Wow, okay. Yeah. Overnight success. Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
So I was assigned it. It's not like I raised my hand for it necessarily, but my company is fortunately always looking into different possibilities for career development within the company. And so I guess this is why I got it, at least in the short term. So anyway, I think over 30 years, I've gone through a lot of different positions in a few different companies, service industry, manufacturing, and now at Tuv Rhineland, it just blends the two together.
Is this basically your entire career has been with one company?
No. I've been with Tuv Rhineland for 10 years, but in Japan for 35 years total. So in various companies, yeah.
Okay, so you've actually worked your way up through the ranks, basically.
In a sense, more
years,
and more, let's say, responsibility over the span of my career. Yeah.
And when you were working in Japan, either in this company or previous company, when was your first actual experience to have staff and you're the leader?
Yeah.
When did that sort of kick in?
Actually, after my first year in Japan, I was already in a leadership position, and at that time I was training new teachers who came to Japan to teach English at the time.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And how about in the corporate world? When was your first chance to lead?
In the corporate world, that was corporate, but
well,
anyway.
I mean, okay,
Yeah.
That English education is a particular area.
Sure.
Right, so I'm thinking more line manager, that type of thing.
Okay, I would say that came when I was about 35.
Okay,
yeah.
And what was that first experience like? I mean, you've already had experience, educating teachers who are coming to Japan. That's one level. Now you're in a corporate role, so it's maybe a little bit different.
Right.
But what was that first experience like? And particularly, you're a woman, you're a foreigner. So here you are, you're in Japan. This is in TV at this time that you're doing?
No, that was, that would be great if I was only 45. But thanks very much. This was when I was in the hospitality industry.
Okay. Right.
And I had a team that was working together with me. And my main function at the time was training and development of all the staff in the hotel.
Okay.
So, of course, I had direct people that I was leading, but also indirect. Yeah. And creating collaboration within the management team was also very important. And I was also sitting on what they call the executive committee of the hotel. So this was different levels, I would say, of leadership at the time.
It was challenging. As I say, you're a foreigner, you're a woman, you're in these leadership roles. You're in Japan. I'm presuming most of the staff are Japanese, I guess.
Yes. I think I've been successful in companies that are open to, first of all, someone like me. Yeah. So I was in a very pure Japanese organization when I was in my early 30s, and I couldn't break through the ceiling.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, and that's also one of the reasons why I took another position, because I felt I had something to offer in that way.
And how did you realize that you couldn't break through? When did that sort of penny drop?
When I asked my boss. I went to him and I said, it's been 5 years.
Right.
Is this going to be my career in this company? And is there any other possibility? And that was basically back in the 90s, and I think this is common, although I know that company now has many women in leadership positions.
You're a trailblazer.
I don't know if I blazed the trail, but it shows me that, maybe if I'd stayed there for another 10 years or so, I might have been able to break through that.
That doesn't sound very appealing.
No.
Another 10 years that I might have.
Yeah.
Maybe.
Yeah. So there are a lot of, I think over time also things change.
I mean, that's interesting, isn't it? You know, they have you,
Yeah.
and you become the president of a major corporation in Japan, yet they won't even give you a leadership role at that time. It just goes to show you how limiting companies can be about the human resources, you know.
Sure,
and you've already had a lot of experience in the developmental side of developing teams, right?
That's
so you're from a management point of view, that's one of the biggest jobs is developing people.
Sure.
And you've got real core skills in that area.
Exactly.
Which I'm sure very few of those other so-called managers had those skills. They could order people around and get the process to work, but you had that plus, but they didn't recognize that.
Right.
Yeah.
I think hospitality industry and Tuv Rhineland really recognize those aspects in people. And Tuv Rhineland especially has even a department called Diversity and Inclusion.
Right, a whole department.
So, a whole department that is working on that and has a lot of different activities that it's not just about gender here.
Is that departments here or this is global?
This is global.
Global,
yeah,
okay.
Yeah, and so within every HR department also there are activities that are going on under the lead of the global concepts.
Heads, right?
Yeah.
Okay. So when you joined this company, did you come in at a managerial role?
Yes,
You
I
did,
did.
right? So you tried to become a corporate leader in the previous company and you weren't given that opportunity. So now you've got an opportunity.
Right.
So how did you approach that? I mean, you're thinking, okay, bingo, I finally got my chance. What was the sort of things going through your mind about how you're going to approach this? Again, you were coming from outside. You're American. You're a woman. But you speak Japanese. You know Japan by this stage. So that's a huge advantage. But what's going through your mind and how are you going to approach being a leader with people you don't know?
Yeah, well, I just decided that trust, since that's one of the things that I feel motivate good collaboration amongst teams, building that trust would be the most important thing. And because I'm American maybe, I tend to be democratic in a sense that I try to involve people. I don't come over them. I come with them together. I stand on the same ground, and I don't have to know everything myself. It's a matter of saying, I know what I can do if necessary, but I want to put people around me that have things that I don't have, and I want to bring those
point,
out.
Because for a lot of leaders, there's that sort of imposter syndrome.
Right.
You know, you get promoted and you're really thinking, well, particularly in Japan, you ask Japanese to step up and take a leadership position and they say, no, I'm not ready yet. They have that really strong loyalty and commitment, but they feel they won't be doing a good enough job, so they don't want to put themselves in that position. So, being able to admit, I don't know everything, because it's sort of, well, the leader, you're the leader, you should know everything, right?
Sure.
There's that sort of nuance there.
Yeah.
How did you navigate through that? Because people might have thought, well, hang on, we expect you to know everything, you're the leader, right? We're going to follow you, but you're now telling me you don't know everything. Why are you the leader? I mean, there's that sort of logic going on, I guess, but how did you get around that?
Well, I think I just decided to be authentic. And if I didn't know something and somebody else didn't, I say, well, let's come back to that then. What are our options? Let's look into this. Let's study it more and then come to a conclusion. So not trying to rush to decisions or, be in this power sort of relationship, but rather what can we do to take this organization or team or whatever to the next level.
So that's coming from your side.
Yeah.
And for most Japanese in companies that have grown up with, for the first few years anyway, your role is to take orders and avoid responsibility. So taking orders is good because you don't have any responsibility, you're just following orders.
Right.
And when you ask people to think, they don't want to do that because that means taking some accountability. Not interested in that.
You're absolutely right.
So if you've got a Japanese group who've had that that style of leadership of they don't have to take any accountability or responsibility, they just follow orders, and you're asking them to actually contribute, to think, to take some accountability. How is that received?
Yeah, it can be received in a lot of different ways, and you made a really good point, The Japanese, in general, like to be led. They don't want to be just thrown a pitch and expected to hit it. and hit the home run. They want to have somebody that's sort of taking care and in a decisive position. So I think with each person, you have to sort of see where that is and have lots of good conversations with them to start with, but also don't put them on the spot. Yeah, especially.
What would be a case where you'd be putting someone on the spot, something we should not do?
Yeah, I think in a group situation, you're having a meeting for, on some topic, and you want to gather information from the others. This could be a very tricky situation for some people. They would not feel comfortable to say something in front of others, or they would not feel comfortable unless they'd had time to think about what they wanted to say, or to even somewhere before the meeting talk to some of their buddies and align there so that they would know that they're not the only person that's going to say that in the room.
So in a typical Western situation, okay, Story, what do you think about this?
Yeah.
Straight off the bat.
No.
I'm not going to do that. Don't do that.
No, probably don't do that.
Probably don't do that.
I mean, you can do it, but don't expect anything.
Okay.
And if you get something, say, yes, there is a little bit of comfort already in this room. Like I said, each person's going to be different. Maybe more and more in Japan, we see people with some experience abroad, and they've learned that it's okay to speak out, and they have maybe a little bit of confidence to do that or something. But I would say most people who have stayed in Japan, you need to spend the time to help them feel comfortable. And one thing that I've done is always send out a series of questions or something ahead of time.
Okay.
Give them a chance to think about that, to know what we're going to talk about. So already trying to set up an environment. And then I may even say, I'm thinking one way or another, but there are a couple of different options. Please see if you think one of these options is good for you. Not telling them exactly the one that I'm choosing, because they otherwise might just align with that. But saying, it's a dilemma here. I'm trying to figure this out. What can you bring to the table to work with this? You need to give them the time.
It's a very collaborative, soft, low-key approach, isn't it? Because often some leaders, I've been one of them, want to be very dynamic, want to run the show, want to, drive things. And in Japan, that's not so easy to get that to work. You can try all that, but as you say, this giving them some time to think. Because it seems to me Japanese don't like to be judged. And it may not be, they might not be worried about you judging them necessarily, but their colleagues judging them. Sort of
That's correct.
Really holding them down, thinking what people are going to say about me.
That's right.
And what are they going to think about me? And so I'll just say nothing because that's the safest option. So
and you can borrow from, training and development techniques, which, this is my background, is don't ask them to introduce themselves individually. Have them talk in a group of 3, and then somebody else introduces somebody else, and you're going to get lots of content.
Yeah.
Right? Because it's not about me. It's about somebody else. It's a little bit, there's a little bit of space there. So that confrontational, direct sort of line, you need to find a line that goes around or through or, between people. And if you can sort of plan that out in how you run a meeting or how you might run, any conversation with somebody, I think you can actually be quite successful. But it does take patience.
Well, that's a good point, isn't it? Because often we are given new tasks and we feel some type of time pressure to demonstrate that the trust they gave in me was correct and I can do the job, and let me show you how dynamic I am.
It's already done.
I've got to, I've got to get into it and I've got to go. So there is a little bit of tension, there isn't, between having that little bit of patience, which takes time, against that sort of pressure of I have to produce results straight away. How did you navigate that?
Yeah, and I think it's a really good point, but it's situational leadership then. And if you have already shown them that they do have opportunities to be heard and that you're good at getting them, giving them a voice, let's say, At the same time, when there are situations that require fast decision-making, they trust that in you and will follow because they know that you had to make that decision. They get it, you know, and it could be anything from, I don't know, there's an emergency situation and you need to clear the building. This is a very different type of leadership, right? Or, I don't know, it could be anything that is time urgent. Oh, we've just gotten a request from headquarters to do something by Friday. I need this, this, and this by then.
That's an interesting point, because sometimes with leaders, middle management leaders, they forget that why part. The message comes out, look, we need this by Friday. Why do we need it by Friday? What's the urgency? Why is this important? How does this fit into the hierarchy of things? We've got other priorities. And that headquarters needs this little segment of the explanation doesn't actually make it. And so the people aren't quite aware of what's driving this. Feel like the boss is putting extra pressure. I'm already busy, you know, I'm busy. You want more on Friday?
Oh my gosh, what's he doing?
You automatically just included that why component.
That's right. Into
the directive, which they go, oh, headquarters wants it by Friday. I understand why, you know, Janine wants this done. I'll get onto it. You know? So sometimes I think we forget the why part, don't we?
And that's a really good word too, why, that you have to be careful about in management, because sometimes speakers of English don't recognize that there are two types of why in usage. And I became very, very aware of this actually when I was working with other Westerners, because I was like, oh, the use of that why is very direct. And what I'm talking about here is the one that you're talking about is giving information about the reason, providing alignment, the background, the context. And I think I totally agree with you. That really helps. But the other why...
Yeah, in that sense, though, if you've got to get a reason, or you've got to get some information, or you've got to get an explanation of something, and then if you're not going to use a very direct, why did that happen, or why did you do that, or why was that deadline missed, or why was that quality not there, or why did we go over budget, or whatever it might be, how do you go about phrasing that then if you're not going to use that direct why? So
that's the why, right? The why that is actually sounding critical of somebody, right? It's saying, it's really putting them on the spot, which is going back to what I originally mentioned, not a way to probably even get an answer to your question. You're just going to get somebody looking down at their feet, maybe, feeling embarrassed that they've done something wrong. It's a very critical why. So what I usually do is ask a more open question.
Okay.
Last week, we missed the deadline. And I know there was a lot going on. You had a lot on your table, a lot on your desk. But maybe we can look back on that and think about what happened. What was going on that made it so that the deadline couldn't be met? So something
there's no why in there at all.
No,
it's
no
what,
why. But involving
why
them in that I'm trying to find this out. I'm not a detective interrogating you. I'm just trying to think together what we could have done better. And this is a coaching style, I would say, more than, you know, a let's say interrogation where I'm always reminded of Columbo, you know, just one more thing.
There's one more question.
So this is what I have found is language, and the way that you use language to communicate and keep it indirect, because that's what's comfortable for the Japanese, is indirect ways of asking things. And it's almost like having a separate, I would say, phrase book that you use in certain situations to take some of the pressure off of that. Now, of course, if I started doing that with you, you would kind of be like, Jenny, what are you doing? Just ask me why, you know, and let's get over this. You want to know why I missed the deadline? It's because of you, you know, and you would, you might even just already immediately find the blame outside of yourself,
and this is a German company.
Yes.
And I talk to German executives. They always tell me in Germany we are very direct, you know, so that's very interesting too. Yes. I guess the culture in the company may be quite direct as well.
It can be. Yes, it can be.
It can be from that cultural point of view.
That's right.
So when you went from, you had a previous position to becoming the president. So I think you were running all of the HR.
That's right. I was running HR for the global products. We call it business stream, but it's like a division. So I was the contact for HR. Yeah.
So it's, in my experience, it's very rare that I think anyone from an HR position makes it to the president. They're usually coming up through CFO or engineering or general management or possibly sales.
Yes.
I mean, it happens, but it's not such a common thing. So, well, congratulations on making that bridge between the two disciplines. But how was that perceived? I mean, you've worked here a long time, so people know you, but it's a little bit of an unusual, inverted commas, route to the top. So how is that perceived within the company?
Yeah, if I feel something in the air, let's say, I mean, unless I take a survey of every person, I probably cannot say for sure. But I could say probably there are people who would have expected, as you said, somebody maybe from an operational role, a finance role, or something like that. But at the same time, there are people who know that I'm a people person. And therefore appreciate that maybe it's somebody that is trying to understand their point of view, what they need, and maybe there's a chance for this type of leadership as well. So I would say it's probably split. There are probably people who are just waiting for the day that maybe Tuv Rhineland chooses a non-HR person again. I don't know. But I don't let that bother me for the moment. I just go forward, and one of the things that I have found is important to that is listening to the voices on the ground as much as possible.
So the other thing is too, the fact that you're a foreigner is probably not such a big deal in a foreign corporate like this.
True.
So that's okay. Another
that
foreigner.
Part is passable.
Another foreigner.
Yeah,
okay, right.
yeah.
But you're a female.
That's right.
So I'm guessing that you are probably the first female to run this organisation.
That's right.
In Japan, right?
That's right. Yeah.
And as we know, there's a very low number of female leaders running companies in this country, be they Japanese nationals or foreigners, right? The overall number is extremely low.
Right.
So how did you feel, again, people responded to that? I mean, they know you, they've worked with you, so you're an insider.
Sure.
That's a big advantage, but still.
Sure.
You know, how did they think about that, do you think? How are you perceived, do you think?
Well, honestly, I've had that my whole life.
Right.
Right?
Yeah.
So if you ask somebody maybe at, at this age about that, I've already dealt with that. So do I spend time focusing on those weird things that you can feel in the air? You can feel how people will approach you or not. You can feel how people interact with you, and okay, this is probably somebody I need to work on a little bit more to gain that. But I feel that at least I have the majority on my side. So I'm a person that thinks of things as, if you start at 0 on something, it's not about going for 100. It's about how many more people you can add to that 0 to be in your boat, to be in your bus. And it's not about, I'm trying for the 100% here. Yeah, and I think if you can focus on the right things and find those people that are willing to work with you for the goals, then I think you can do a lot. And of course, you will always have opposition. And that's also a good thing, because it makes you aware of things that you may not have thought about yourself. And so trying to be open to those things, I think, is also important, whether or not we like it the way it's said to us or the way we feel about that. But honestly speaking, I feel very included in this company, and I every day wake up wanting to go to work. So I think that's
working.
Yeah.
Well, 20% of the team here produce 80% of the results according to the Pareto principle. If you take the Pareto principle of the Pareto principle, it means that basically 4% of the team here are producing 64% of the results, in your Pareto.
Yeah.
So when you talk about adding zeros, you don't need 100.
That's right.
You need 4% of the people to get 64% of the outcomes, or
very good.
20% of the people to get 80% of the outcomes. So if you're getting the right
Yep.
4% or the right 20%, then you're on the mark, aren't you?
That's a very nice analysis. I'll remember that.
Yeah, it's interesting.
Yeah,
Isn't it? I never thought about the Pareto of the Pareto, but if you take it that next step,
sure.
it makes sense. So in terms of, I'm thinking back to my remark before about German executives. I met men, usually men. They often tell me, yes, in Germany, our business culture, we tell it like it is. We're very direct and, boom, boom, boom. So how about dealing with headquarters in this role? Now, you were global for that HR role you had before, but now you're running the country and you're interacting with parts of the empire, particularly headquarters. So you have your I'm not going to use the word style, I guess, but you have your philosophy, you have your approach, which works really well in Japan.
Sure.
But if that German headquarter style is much more robust, direct, how do you find working with that? Because maybe they're a little bit more time is money, let's get to it.
Sure.
Why is this happening in Japan type of, not what's happening in Japan and something missed. Like, how do you adjust to that?
Yeah, I might get that other why, for sure.
Exactly,
Yeah. Like I said, leadership should be situational. And that's something I'm aware of, that I need to always switch how I act. I'm also in charge of Asia Pacific. Even the countries of Asia Pacific, there's a little differences there as well about how the situation is and how you need to lead and how you need to approach. But of course, I know that different expectations are of me when I'm in a group of, let's say, top-level management, which I'm in these meetings from time to time. But my boss is also a woman.
Back in Germany, okay.
And so one of the board members of TUV Rheinland, there are 3 board members, and she is also of human resources background. So, so, she is always, of course, asking the group of us that report to her to work on points that she sees are critical to giving feedback on that why that might come up, or that she's hearing probably on her level, or within headquarters. But I think our headquarters, the people that are working there, are really fantastic, and I can always go to them and have a very open conversation. And I feel respected that even if I have a different viewpoint or something, we can discuss it. But I'm going to have all those pieces of evidence or whatever to make my argument, because I know that they expect it. So it's how you approach the situation, I believe. Yeah.
It's good, because often I think, it's a generalization, but I think it's one of those generalizations that's true. Men have got a lot of ego baggage they carry around with them, and to admit they don't know everything or can't do everything, or, very hard. So they have to have a lot of bluster and, have to be quite dogmatic sometimes to make their point, and particularly with other men,
Sure.
Becomes quite combative. So I think the fact you've got a female boss, that probably takes a lot of friction out potentially too. But I'm sure you've got direct reports in APAC who are men.
Yes.
And so probably in a lot of those cultures, that would not be a typical thing to have a woman as the boss, perhaps. So that would be, I guess, an interesting experience for them.
Sure.
Are you finding any differences there in dealing with them?
I have no problems with my direct reports, and they're from all different nationalities, and you're right, they're all men. But again, it's about the relationship, and it's about the way that we work together, and I'm always, talking to them, do you need more of this from me? Do you need less of this from me? And they're very open to tell me, they don't want to be micromanaged, or they don't want this or something, and, we have a great team. And I think this also comes from the fact that I have been in the company for long enough that I have these relationships. People know who I am, and I've been authentic. I don't put on airs. I don't try to play politics games and things like this. I try to be who I am. And if that's what has helped this, then I should continue to do it. And so if I run into issues and things with people, it's good to talk about it, and not let it, go on.
You talked about having the explanation why. You talked about being authentic.
Yeah.
You talked about looking for options instead of just directing people. So, and you may have covered parts of this question already, but what have you found works well in terms of getting engagement here in Japan?
Yeah, okay. I tend to think and believe in bottom-up.
Okay.
Okay. And that is, first of all, if you're going to make a change, I think you know that sometimes in Japan this is quite difficult. They get comfortable with a way, and when you make a change, you really have to manage that change. This company is moving over to teleworking.
This company's what?
Teleworking.
You're doing teleworking now?
We are doing it now
Right.
as a matter of the pandemic, but post-pandemic, we will continue it,
Right.
right?
Now, is that a function of you have realised that you don't actually have to have line of sight of people leading them to produce results, or is this a result of you've discovered that the people are rebelling and they don't want to come into the office necessarily, they'd rather work from home, or they like the freedom, or what's driving that?
I would say it's trust.
Oh, okay.
Trust is driving it. And the employees want it. And it's possible. All of these things. So actually, I was already looking into this before the pandemic. The pandemic came, and they verified the trust even more.
So why were you thinking about it before the pandemic? What was taking on those lines of
work-life balance was probably the key word to me. And we have a lot of people who have children. We have people who have aging parents, and we would like to keep them in our company. Yeah, we would like to be able to find ways to make it possible for them to still work for us. And so we had already been doing some, let's say, call it home office arrangements for people who were caring for some either child or needing to, go out to pick them up or these types of things, or even a parent that they were trying to support. And we had done this with several cases. And so I thought, I think there are more possibilities here. And I was also reading trends in the market and seeing this. And our U.S. Company, basically, I would say maybe 80 to 90% of the people are doing home office from years ago. And it's working there. And I thought,
okay, so there's a precedent.
And what is it that makes our company attractive to people is this work-life balance. And so what does that look like to you? And we began, let's say, about, I think it's been 5-6 years ago, we started to do like Casual Friday. And we started to do flex shift, as we called it, because the customer is very important in a service-oriented company like ours. We need to be there for the customer. If the customer is still working from 9 to 5 or whatever, we need to be there for them. So how do we cover that? So we started to experiment with shifts that were, at least covering that period of time. But some people, in the summertime, how it gets so light in Japan at 3 o'clock in the morning. No, it's not 4 o'clock in the morning. Some people, they're ready to start working already. And then they would like to do something after work, and finish early. Or there's people that would like to
sleep in.
Yeah, sleep in. So there's differences, and this is also about inclusion, right? Differences in people. How do we make our company attractive to people and keep them feeling good about our company? So we started with this flex shift. We took another survey after this, and the majority of people said, please make it full-time flex.
This is before?
This is way before the pandemic.
Wow, okay,
yeah, so we were already doing things.
You were a long way down the track.
It's about listening to the people and what works for them, what they want. And this was the overwhelming voice in this company. Not required. If you want to come from every morning at 8 o'clock, fine. You have a place to come. But if you would like a little bit of flexibility because you have family needs or just personally, I think a lot of colleagues were using it for studying or for going to the gym or something like this, or like you said, just getting some extra sleep, right?
Well, Japan's a sleep-deprived culture, if you ask me.
Yeah.
All the research shows they're getting a lot less sleep than most other countries, so that's good if they get the right amount of sleep, I think.
That's right. So anyway, then, we started to look at this. Now, what is the other thing that is making people, let's say, tired or not having as much work-life balance on the life side? It's all this time they spend on the trains.
Yeah.
So what can we do about that? And so then, if it's possible to work from home or something like that, fine. And I thought about the salespeople to begin with. They are asked to come to the office, and then they go from the office to the customer.
Yep.
And it may be very far away again. And I thought, this is a waste of time and energy. We're not focused on the customer. We're focused on a company rule. Right? And I thought, So this is actually all before the pandemic. I saw these network offices popping up where you can go in for a couple thousand yen, and you can be a member as a company. You can use any of them. So I offered it to our sales colleagues. And that was a big change, though. Because
Did
it's
they go for it, or they?
Well, there was some wondering about it. I said, let's just try it. And now it's absolutely fine, of course. But in the beginning, it was like, if I don't have a desk in the company, does that mean I don't have a job?
That's funny because Japanese would tell me if they, because they don't take long holidays, they would say things like, if I don't, come to the office, if I take a long holiday, my desk won't be there when I get back. So what are you talking about? In Australia, we take like 4 weeks holiday, we never got a desk when they come back. But that thing about my desk won't be there, like, what are you talking about?
But it's a security thing. And I thought, okay, I hadn't thought of that, how important that was. But somebody told me that, and I thought, this is my blind spot. Okay, then let's just try it. This won't be forever if it's not working. And I checked back with the sales manager later, and it's working. It's working. And I think they realized that they're saving, time off of this. And the other thing was, too, I was worrying about the work atmosphere, because I know that some of them were probably popping into a coffee shop or something after visiting a customer, maybe to do a little bit of work. And you know how that is. Everybody's talking about stuff, and it's very loud and not such a good environment. And they wouldn't even have access in those, let's say, even a few years ago when we were still printing things. They wouldn't have access to a printer or something. And so this solved several problems, and I think it was a win-win. That we had already been trialing some of these things, had great success, and then the pandemic hit. And
you sailed through that seamlessly.
Our IT department was so on the ball to make sure everybody had the access that they needed, and the virtual meetings and stuff that we do, they're working really well. So but then during the pandemic, people found out whether or not this is really the way they want to work. And so now what we're doing is, post-pandemic, what is your style? Now you've worked in different ways for you, and to offer flexibility. I would like to be in the office every day. Welcome. I would like to be in the office 1 day a week. I would like to be in the office 2 days a week. So they can choose. And this came from the employees, that they wanted the flexibility. So we did a survey, we made an employee committee, and they said, and it was really great what they pointed out to me. And they said, Jennie, yes, we can allow this of our fellow colleagues, but they all need to have their picture in the Outlook, so that when new people come in, they can know what somebody looks like, and they can create already some networks knowing what somebody looks like, and learn the names of people. Everybody should be required to have their picture in there. That came from them. So I think engagement in the policy hopefully is higher if you do this kind of bottom-up work. And it's the 80-20 rule. It's 80% on the process, the preparation before the go live. And of course the managers have a chance to input on it. We've rewritten parts of the guidelines based on those inputs. And I'm quite sure this is going to be super successful. But I'm sort of waiting for that moment to implement it because we're, as you know, in the midst of another surge.
We're still waiting for the post-pandemic. We thought we were, but we're back into it. So what about the idea, some companies are going for, mandatory 1, 2, 3 days in the office, the rest not. And they do that, they say, because they worry about the coagulation of the people and the culture and ideas and the conversations and the stickiness. They worry about that. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think it's an important thing to have in mind. And you have to make sure that you plan some opportunities for people to come. And this will be something that I will remind the managers of, that they need to plan from time to time. A time when everybody comes in and not just sit around and do a meeting, but to add some social aspect to that. And this will be something that we need to have, on the radar and make sure that when we do this, that we're not losing people to this sort of feeling that they're not part of the whole. Of course, we do have a number of positions in this company where we rely on them to be in the office because we are a testing, inspection,
you can't do
certification.
That from a coffee shop, right?
Yeah, they can't do that in a coffee shop. So this is the other side of the story, is making sure that we provide an atmosphere, an environment that those people will also feel the company has thought about them. And that's in process right now.
That's a tricky one, isn't it?
That's a tricky one.
Sometimes you get that sort of two-tier thing happening. And then people feel, hang on a minute.
That's right.
This isn't fair.
That's right.
That's a very difficult line to tread.
That's right. That's right. So working on some things there, and I've already been discussing those, and I think we have some possibilities for them to feel that. But many of them said, "Oh, Jennie, but we joined this company because we knew that we were going to be doing that from the beginning. That's our function. And look at the great equipment that we have to use here. And, those are not in my house. So, so they get it, but at the same time, you need to show some empathy, I think, that they do have a different situation, but also create the environment that, yes, we need to find ways, and they may be different from somebody else. And for me, this would be a great breakthrough, that people are not saying, hey, that guy gets to be in their house for 3 days a week, and I only get to be in mine for 2. I don't want this kind of atmosphere. I would like that people recognize that we do that because people are different. They're not all the same. They're not all have all the same situations, and we should respect that. What the most important thing is that people are performing their jobs and doing what is expected of them.
If you want to be successful as a leader, do the Leadership Training for Managers course. All companies need people who can both manage and lead. Leading people screams out for real skills in communication, dealing with all different types of people, being excellent at innovation, planning, delegation, handling mistakes, doing performance reviews really well, and inspiring and motivating the team. Do the Leadership Training for Managers course now in either Japanese or English. Are you doing business with Japan? Do you really know how things work? Japan Business Mastery provides the answers. Do you have the right networks and know how to create them? Do you know how to get on the same wavelength with Japanese buyers? Do you know what being trustworthy looks like from the Japanese perspective? Japan Business Mastery is based on more than 30 years' experience in Japan and will become your go-to guide. Want to succeed in Japan? Buy Japan Business Mastery now. So on that point, one of the prerequisites for getting innovation in teams is to have engagement.
Right.
So you're getting this bottom up, you're having a lot of empathy, you've been a star of working from home because you were way ahead of everyone when you started with the pandemic. But how do you go about getting innovation then? Because when people are isolated from each other, they talk about the water cooler conversations, those random conversations where information is exchanged and something goes, oh, right, didn't know that, which wasn't sort of planned, and the machine didn't make that conversation happen. It just happened by itself through that random connection. And where you're getting opportunities for people to get together to brainstorm and think about things. And how does that fit in?
Yeah, well, fortunately, a lot of the people that we hope for having innovation are the ones that do need to come to the office. So they're still having those discussions, those informal discussions.
I wasn't thinking so much about the R&D team, because that's their job. I mean, if you're an R&D, your job is innovation, so that's part of your job description. I'm thinking about those who are not given, like, every organisation has people, processes, time, money. You have to get the balance right, and you can always innovate in many, many different ways. So I'm thinking not the R&D specialist
but just
innovators,
in general, right?
Just in general. How, because now they've scattered to the winds. How do you pull innovation out now?
Well, I think that's through regular meetings to begin with, and
now,
that's
these
what
are
we
online?
do. Online, they could be also in person. Right now we're not doing so many in-person ones, but we have different committees and different groups of people that meet regularly, and these are the ways that they're talking about that. We also have discussions about strategy and how we grow our company, what are the ideas for doing that. I think it's creating the environment and the culture that says, yes, we are open to that. And creating the opportunities, right, to do that.
So one part of that is how you treat failure, how you treat mistakes. Because one of the ironies is sometimes leaders will give people scope, and if they make a mistake, whack, right behind the ear, you screwed it up, right? And so anytime you do that, you just cancel that person's innovation ticket for the rest of their career. So how do you balance out when things are not going well in terms of someone's made a mistake or project failed, or, the flip side of the good part of innovation is failure. How do you deal with that?
Sure. Well, the ideal is that we learn from our mistakes. I think you know that. But getting everybody to have that same concept is something I would say is an ongoing project, right? For me, in fact, I still, even now that you're talking about this, I just wrote an email to my management team in the Asia Pacific area, giving them this case study that had been written up. And I had written in there, please do read this. It's not for circulation. Please, it's for your own use. But in this, I think there are many important learnings, key messages, and reminders to us in our roles. And that's all I wrote. So I'm giving them this expectation of what to do with that. We do this regularly also in our management meetings, for example, quality management, our health, safety, environment manager. They are bringing up things that have happened during the last month as actual things. What has happened? What could we have done better? And open to questions. We have also different types of things going on where we create an awareness of people and let's say a mindset. So we have an open, let's say, mailbox for suggestions, as many companies have, but we have a mailbox for hazard spots, spotting a possible risk or hazard to someone. For example, this corner of the building has a blind spot. And if somebody's racing by in their bicycle, there could be an issue here. And maybe something like that happened where somebody was like just walking along, and it was like, oh, ooh, if I just stepped out further, I would have gotten hit by that bicycle. What's the situation? Reporting that is the first step. And then there is a committee. They will think about it, what are the options and things like this, and then they will have a campaign where they're communicating this internally. So this is a process that we use just for health, safety, and environment within our company that is applicable to a lot of things. And I've noticed that people bring up things like this, not only about possibly getting hit by a bicycle, but something with a process. Is that having, like, do we really need that step in there? Or can we reduce this? Do we really need to have somebody doing this all the time? And so I have also introduced the concept, I think you know this one also, what do we stop doing, what do we continue doing, and what do we start doing? Using this sort of framework or model when we're going through a change or just regularly to review something, I think is another way to approach. And if they get used to doing that, then it's not sort of this, oh, I shouldn't speak out anymore, but maybe they have something they can
I guess,
introduce there.
your company's basically doing certification for other companies, which is, again, very high focus on quality and
That's right.
regulation and
Correct.
compliance
That's
and those
right.
sorts of
That's
things.
right.
So I guess as a workforce, they have got probably a very high level of
Right.
awareness and sensitivity to those things already,
Right.
which probably aids that, doesn't it? What about trust? What have you found works well to get people to trust you as a leader?
To trust me as a leader. Sorry, I have to just go back to being authentic again and honest, willing
So
to...
let's flesh that out. Okay, people,
Yeah.
we throw these buzzwords around like authentic. What does that actually mean? When you say authentic, what is going through your mind there?
Yeah, so I'm not putting on airs. I'm not shifting who I am between different people or something like that. If I've said something
So
to
you're being
you...
consistent.
Yeah, consistency. Yeah, I guess it is another one. I think it's also trust comes from communication. And if you are not communicating with somebody, you cannot expect to have a high level of trust just automatically, even if they know, oh, you're in this position or something. So don't assume your position gains you trust. You have to create it yourself. So if I go into a situation of change or something else and I've never spoken to that person before, I'm first going to have a conversation with that person. Yeah, and again, talking about the why, the reason, the rationale why, making sure that that's well understood to people, this type of thing. Yeah.
It's almost like, I'm drawing a long bow here perhaps, so it's almost like a mini Nemawashi one-on-one approach, isn't it? So
yeah, sure.
Nemawashi, this sort of, they call it groundwork in Japanese.
that's right.
They call it groundwork. So you're setting up for an outcome.
Right.
By spending time
That's right.
before
Correct.
A time of application
That's
or execution of something's going to happen. And so you're actually investing time. And I think that's what I'm listening to. I'm thinking to myself, oh, yeah, she's basically doing one-on-one interaction with people to build that trust.
That's right.
So that you can draw on that.
It's true. It's
in the
true.
future,
Some people you don't need to do so much of that with, and you know who they are.
Yeah.
But I would say in general, when you're going to make a change or you want to do something that's involving, that's going to impact people, it's worth the time in the end. And maybe that nemawashi comes from Japanese culture or something like that. But for me, it's just good communication and good
Well, you
relationships.
raised the point there about investing the time, and often leaders are running processes.
Yeah.
And, barking out orders and, making sure all the things, just wheels are spinning,
Sure.
blah, blah, blah. But that's really what managers do. But leaders are doing that, plus they're developing the people.
That's right.
And they're setting the strategy. But developing the people, like you can set up a machine
Right.
and it'll run.
Right.
That's fine. And it's done. But people aren't done. They're never done. And you're always got to invest that time. And often in our training, we teach time management. And it's very rare that we meet people who do a good job on managing their time, frankly. So they're always time poor. And the first thing that suffers is that investment in the people part.
Sure.
which is sort of ironic when you think about it. So that's something that I'm glad you raised that point, because sometimes it's missed, isn't it?
Yeah. Do you know the 7 habits?
Yeah, I do. Yeah, I'm a graduate, actually.
Yeah,
of,
so
7 Habits,
that the 4 quadrants,
Yeah,
that's the concept there. And I think you have to manage your time based on the types of things, and never forget about quadrant 2,
Yeah.
which is this process, planning, innovation,
Important but not
talking to
urgent.
people. Yeah, exactly.
Important but not urgent.
Yeah, exactly.
And I think too many
yeah.
people in quadrant 1,
Quadrant
important
1, yeah.
and urgent,
Yeah, or quadrant 3.
Yeah.
And then on the weekend, quadrant 4.
Yeah.
On the couch.
That's all right. It's a weekend.
Yeah.
So what about in terms of, if you're going to give some advice to a newcomer to Japan, they haven't worked here before, it's
Sure.
their first posting, what would be some advice? I mean, you've talked about a lot of
Sure.
things already, but what would be some additional advice you'd give them on how to be successful here
Yeah.
in their posting?
Number 1 is listen a lot before you start to make any changes or, try to bring something across that is currently not happening or whatever. Yeah.
Now,
Listen
I raised
a
a
lot.
point there about listening, because there are many levels of listening. You know, there's sort of fake listening, pretend listening.
Yeah.
Then there's sort of levels of listening where it's selective listening, where you've actually got an outcome,
That's right.
and you're listening for things which will tell you that that outcome that you want to have is the right one. And then there's different higher
Active
levels
listening, right?
of listening, where you're actually
Yeah.
suspending your own thought
That's right.
process as an overriding brainwave, and actually stopping that and really focusing on what they're saying to have that empathetic listening level, or highest level listening. So, yeah, when we talk about listening, we're not really talking about just, I'm going to direct this. I'm listening to what you want, but actually we're going to do what I want anyway.
Yeah. Your key words there, empathy, and high level listening, meaning that it's really forcing yourself to put aside many things that you have already in your mind, or even about the culture of people, about Japan, about anything, trying to not go in with, I'm just going to change you to be like me, but rather, I have my culture, I respect myself for that, who I am, but other people have other ways of doing things, and I need to see what those are first before I, start to assume anything. And I think if you can do that and spend the time doing that and train yourself to do that, it's hard, right? I think you can be quite successful. Yeah.
Any other things you'd give them advice on?
Yeah.
Should they learn Japanese?
Well, that's a tough one. I think you should make an attempt to learn the culture of the language, maybe.
So when you say the culture of the language, what do you mean?
So in other words, why are Japanese silent? So you could learn the Japanese. あなたの意見は何ですか? Right? What is your opinion about that? And you can get the same reaction as if you said that in English to them. So you can't just assume that because you speak the language that necessarily you're going to get any different communication from them. So you have to think of the cultural things. And again, this goes back to the very first part of our conversation about how do you get people to state their opinions or talk about things. And like I said, if you do it on the spot like this, you're going to maybe in many situations get a reaction where they don't immediately say something. And you may assume that means they're stupid or they're not competent in this topic.
Or they're not motivated.
Or, they're not motivated. It can be read in many different ways, but what is that really telling you? What is the body language about? And I would say learning that language, the body language, is more important than maybe trying to, as an adult, maybe that is already quite seasoned, trying to learn a very difficult language such as Japanese. to the level where you think that that's going to be the tool that allows you to gain the trust of people, or suddenly make them able to change faster, or something like that. That would be my general feeling. Of course, enjoying life in Japan, having friends, if you can work on that conversational part and stuff, I think that's of course going to make your experience so much more enjoyable in this country, because there's so much to enjoy here. And that's probably why I've been here for 35 years.
Yeah, that's why I've been here for 37 and only came for 2.
Yeah.
One of the things too that you mentioned, it's a good point, about sometimes you talk to foreign leaders here and they're a bit frustrated, they'll ask questions in meetings and they won't, there's no answers coming,
Right.
silence.
Right. Yeah.
And they're like, what's wrong with this place?
Yeah,
and I suggest to them, I say, try this next time.
Mm-hmm.
Say, please write down your thoughts on X, Y, Z.
Right.
Give them time.
Right.
Okay, so Jenny, what did you write down?
Mm-hmm.
I said, don't ask them what they think.
Mm-hmm.
Just ask them what they wrote down. That simple,
Change.
tiny little adjustment. Because when you ask Japanese people what you think, then they get this, or if I say the wrong thing, and am I the right person to answer this, and I haven't consulted, and all those things you mentioned before, their brain starts frying with all this sort of internal dilemma to answer what you think is a very simple question, and they don't know what to say.
That's right.
But if you ask them what do you think about it, write it down, I've got time, they can make their notes, then they have an answer. They're not embarrassed to have no answer, and they know they've been given time, so there's an obligation to have an answer,
right? Because
they're giving you time. And what did you write down?
Yes.
It's a simple change of the language.
That's right.
So I think when you don't know those things, you tend to do it in a very Western way, and then you wonder why, what's wrong with these people?
Yeah, and if you're an American, you're supposed to be a king or queen of BS, right? That's how it is. And people expect somebody to say something, even if it's not, oh, well, whatever, and you just, oh, that guy's full of BS, or, this type of stuff goes on in our culture, and that's not the way of Japan.
No, it's not.
It's definitely not. And if you think that you're going to get somebody just to say something, no matter what it's their idea or just BS, it's not going to necessarily happen so much. So you have to put your assumptions aside, and like you said, some really good techniques for taking it off a very confrontational, in your face, what do you, because the I is not here, it's the we. If you can do any of these types of things, you're going to be more successful in that way, and don't expect that over time they become I's. They will always be we's, because that's how they've grown up. That's their education. That's their system. And don't try to change people's culture. Try to work with it. This is my big suggestion for you there.
Are there any things about leadership I haven't asked you, which we should have covered? Anything we've missed?
Actually, I think we've covered quite a lot. And I think maybe just going on one of the topics we were talking about is, how do we bring more women into leadership in Japan? This would be something maybe I think is a good question to ask. It's getting more and more attention, right,
I read
in Japan
a
these
statistic the other day that said that if there's a job going and a man looks at the job description and he only has 60% of what's required for that job, he'll give it a go. A woman will look at that, and if she feels she's got 90% of what's required, she'll give it a go, which is one of the things talked about, that's sort of self-restriction on the part of women to actually have a go. And often they don't want to put their hand up for many, many reasons. Could be family, could be time, it could be being judged, it could be holding themselves back, it could be imposter syndrome, all these things. So trying to, fix that and get more women in leadership. So I'd love to hear your views on that.
But that's a really good statistic, and I think that really paints the picture of what maybe a lot of women are up against. And maybe they create those things falsely, or as a way to judge themselves a little bit differently. I think what we have to do is just make sure that we're giving them enough encouragement and the environment not to think that they have to have 90%. And this is one of the things I try to do, right, is to give an equal chance, but you need to give enough direction, enough support. I think a lot of companies are doing mentoring. They're doing, programs where doesn't matter about gender. Everybody can come and join. I think it's this idea of giving people chances and opportunities, but not just throwing it. Having a net under them, having an eye out for them. When you see something, is coming out of those characteristics, like, ooh, there's a confidence thing going on here. Seems to be that they're a little bit upset or not sure about themselves. To pull them in and say, is there anything I can do? How's that going with blah, blah? And, really, really putting a little bit of focus on there, giving them a confidence that they're fine. It doesn't matter. They can do it. And I think this is what many women need to believe, that they don't need to be perfect and they don't need to be like a guy in terms of how they are working as a leader, because I think many of the things we've been talking about, I truly believe in, are the leadership that both men and women hope. They don't want somebody micromanaging them. They don't want somebody going, top down on stuff all the time. I think both men and women hope to have this type of leader. And many women have that naturally because they're brought up in society. Maybe they're going to become a mom someday. There's this general culture around that, and they have a lot of confidence about caring for people or spotting those things. And maybe that they have been trained to be more empathetic, and it's fine to be empathetic. There are certain things that I think women bring into the game that they should say, hey, I've already got these naturally. And maybe some of the guys would like to have them too, and they're kind of, how do I get that, and how do I do that? And they use what's good works for them, but they're two very different, sometimes, capabilities that are brought to the game. One is not necessarily wrong or right, but I'm saying women have a lot to bring in already without worrying about what's in the job description.
Interesting too, diversity and inclusion is really a big topic at the moment. And
right.
For vast cases in Japan, it's really about gender so much. America's a different case around a different bundle of issues there. But when we first started getting asked to work on diversity issues in Japan, which they meant actually gender equity issues in reality.
Correct.
And they'd say, well, look, why don't you come in and train the women? I said, oh, yeah, we can do that. But they may not be the problem. What about the guys? What about the managers, the men? Have you thought about training them? And it was like, oh, I hadn't thought about that. This is going back a couple of years now, but it presents that problem of you as the leader, or leaders in general, or the leadership, like you've got a diversity inclusion department, right?
Yeah.
At the top level, the senior leaders get it, right? We want to have a diverse organisation. We want to get the maximum capacity for creative, great people in an organisation, right? Draw on the biggest pool. But at the sort of working level, where there are guys leading teams, and, are they getting it? And how do you make sure that the sorts of things you're thinking, that those conversations are actually happening at that grassroots level? How do you drive that down to make sure that's actually working in reality? Right.
Well, I think that's also a lot of different things. I could answer that in a lot of different ways. Training is one, is making sure that they're given opportunity to be aware that there are differences and it's okay. We have a lot of blind spots. I still remember one of the first diversity trainings that I had. Actually, it was in my master's program. And I still remember how could I be so ignorant of this? And it was a really excellent presentation, but she came in and she just had various things with her. And she was just asking questions. She was not bringing in theory and things like that. And you know what? One of the things was, and this is the one that really sticks out to me, is she says, she points to the Band-Aid. She brought in a Band-Aid. And she said, why is it that the Band-Aid is this color? And of course, things are changing a bit, and you will see them in various colors, children's characters on them, various things like this now. But back then, 100 years ago, when I was a student, really, it was my skin color. But why is it that color?
Mm.
And then you start to think about this and things. So I think it's about starting with these little pieces of awareness to say that it's nobody's fault, but you, for your whole life, that was the color of a Band-Aid. Until that lady asked me that question. And I thought, oh, how terrible.
Hadn't thought about it.
I hadn't thought about it. And
matches my skin colour.
Yeah.
What's the problem?
So what's the problem?
It's fine,
Yeah. And probably the creator of it
Yeah,
thought the same.
exactly. A guy.
Yeah.
Probably.
But then you start thinking about some Asians or some Black Americans or, other people. Oh, that would just stick out and make it look like, something else, right? And maybe that's okay. Maybe somebody doesn't worry about it. But I thought, and there were several questions like that. I mean, I could go on and on about this, but I still remember this.
So these are
clearly.
the sort of unconscious bias, conscious bias.
Bringing it to the conscious level, right? A little bit.
Right?
Yeah. This would be what I would say is the starting point. And it's not about, again, saying people, you're so stupid, why don't you know that? Or why can't you figure that out? You live together with each other all the time, you work together, why don't you know these things? It's about putting some focus on that and saying, what is it that causes, therefore, us not to maybe respect each other as much or to treat each other inclusively or with trust? It's these things that we didn't plant in our head. They got planted by things in our environment, in our education, in TV, in whatever, and we need to dismantle the fact that those are just automatically there. We need to realize that we can sort of take a hold of those things and say, wait a minute, did I just say something that might have made that person feel that I didn't get, that they maybe are not comfortable with that? Having this, like you said, more consciousness than the unconscious.
Yeah, we're doing a lot with diversity and inclusion too, and one of the interesting things in Japan is reverse discrimination. The guys can complain, oh, it's gone too far the other way, Now it's women are being favoured. Somehow we're bad. This doesn't seem right to me. I work hard too. So it gets quite complex, doesn't it? So how do you deal with that sort of? I'm not saying you've got it here, but
that's perfect. I mean, that's a really, really good point, because to be perfectly honest with you, in the United States, when they tried to make some changes about this, they had quotas. And I don't believe in quotas.
Okay, why is that?
Because I think it actually goes to the wrong side of it, like you said, and let's say we have a male or 3 males and 3 females that are candidates for that position, but I've already got in my mind, if I hire a woman for this, I'm going to make my quota. I won't even look for the best person for the job. I will, take this route. And then you're right, it's reverse discrimination. What? Why is, because she was a woman. Oh, because blah, blah, this type, I don't like, it should always be, as much as possible, to bring up both sides to understanding each other, if we're talking about gender, if we're talking about anything, I would say, that we try to have an equal understanding, at least, of each other. This is what we should work for. And of course, we can't do this 100%. We're always going to hurt somebody. But we can always go back to somebody and say, you know what? I said something and I thought about it and it really, I bet I said something that made you feel bad. I just want you to know, blah, blah, blah. Or that somebody else is seeing that and bringing that up, right? And saying, you know, you might want to phrase that in a little different way the next time because it sounds like this. Being able to give this kind of feedback to each other and monitor each other about it, to me, is much more effective than a quota.
So what would be your definition of leadership?
My definition of leadership, wow, is different from management. Okay, so I think sometimes we think leadership and management are the same, but you've pointed that out. I think you said that as well, that, managing things like finances or this type of thing, that falls under management to me, and we have a lot of managers. But leadership can happen at any level. And for me, it happens first with the person themselves, whether or not they can lead themselves and take care of themselves and be there for themselves. So leadership is a people thing, and it's a capability of a person to probably reflect and then take action that is appropriate to a particular situation. Yeah, but doesn't depend on themselves only, but is thinking of the whole in this circumstance. So this maybe is not a typical sort of definition for you, but it's because I feel that leadership can happen at any level, in any function, because it's more of an attitude or a way that you do something. So let's say, you are in a busy train station in the morning, and somebody falls. Somebody that is going to go over to that person and try to see that they're okay, or protect them from the herd of people walking, across the station, or try to get some help for them. This is somebody that takes leadership. And they're not even in the same company. They don't even know each other. But I have seen time and time again where I can't get to somebody like that, and people just walking right past. No, nothing.
Not my problem.
Not my problem. So it's people that I think, look at things in general and are willing to say, hey, I think we can do something better here, or make a change here, or something needs to happen here, and making that split decision. This is somebody that has leadership qualities, I think. Yeah.
Great. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Well, it's been fascinating. And I really
it's been great talking to you,
really
Greg. I think it's been a while since we've had a deep conversation like this, so it's been a lot of fun. Thanks a lot.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you. Join us again for our next episode of Japan's top business interviews.